Well, almost 5 years, nearly to the day, after Markus Jooste got into so much trouble at Steinhoff, last night he hit the rock called the South African Reserve Bank that's accused him of contravening exchange control. They've gone that angle to get hold of him. His assets have been seized, and it's now all over the South African media, as you might have imagined. With me in studio is Gary Harlow, whose name's been pulled into this as well, Gary. Maybe before we go into all of that, when did you hear about what happened yesterday? Yesterday morning, apparently. My pals in Hermanus say that Markus had his first visitors ever, or certainly since the Steinhoff issue.
No, I got a WhatsApp last night at about 7.
Last night,
that was the first. And then they came through thick and fast. I mean, no one wants to see your name in the news.
How were you
and
brought in?
The worst is that I knew such a little, so I didn't know what to say to anyone. But my story is my story. My relationship with Markus goes back 30 years. So
maybe let's start there.
Yeah.
How did you meet the guy?
So I met him, we were both in our 20s, and I was involved in a leveraged leasing structure. Tax was my discipline, and he was a potential client. He was financial director of a canning company. And we just hit it off. He's a really, really smart guy. He couldn't speak a word of English. I couldn't speak a word of Afrikaans, and we kind of communicated, and we became partners. I invested in a company that he bought called Gama Gama.
Yes.
And in fact, I had a 20% share, along with Michael Delport and Elizabeth Bradley. Anyway, that unfortunately...
Elizabeth Bradley, she's royalty
the
of South
Toyota.
Africa.
Yeah. And that came to an end after a few years. We were a little bit on the short side of that Absa lifeboat that came through, and they pulled all their facilities. So Gama Gama went under, and in business, and I've been an entrepreneur all my life, you take your losses and you move on. If you're going to blame anyone, blame yourself. It was just an unfortunate time, and that's basically it. So Klaus Dorn came along and bought the debt from Absa. Markus then was resurrected as the CEO and shareholder in Steinhoff, and that was my end of my business relationship with Markus. So we sort of kept in touch in the early years. And then we drifted apart as he got more and more busy with his traveling around the world. But he was very good about phoning me on birthdays. He was very good. He's very good like that. Very generous. He would get a generous present of scotch. And then on my 60th birthday, I have a farm near Hermanus, and I invited him, and we sort of reconnected and chatting, and I knew nothing what was about to happen.
So this was before the Steinhoff explosion.
Yeah. And then it went pop, and I got a phone call from him about 2 weeks later saying he'd really like to see me. And I went there, and he was not looking in a good state at all. You could see the dark rings in his eyes. He was really in a bad space. And he said, Gary, I've got to deal with a lot, and I'm looking to people that I can trust that will look after my family if something should happen to me. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I've got this family trust called the Silveroak Trust, and I'm approaching you, and I'm approaching Rian du Plessis, and I've also known Rian when he was still at Rand Merchant Bank many years ago. Would you be prepared to be trustees? And if you say no, I understand. But you guys have got nothing to do with Steinhoff, and you're both chartered accountants, so I presume that you will look after my family and make all the right calls. So, of course, you do your diligence in terms of what's in it. Is it linked at all? And really, what I managed to glean was it had the main homes, the home in Hermanus, the home in Stellenbosch, and 2 other properties, I think, in Pretoria, and a loan account, which I think at that stage we didn't know. It just predeceased my time as a trustee. So I've been a trustee for 4 years. And it was to Mayfair, the company below. But at that stage, I think it was pretty common knowledge that Mayfair was being targeted by the banks and probably didn't have any assets. So if there was a loan, it probably had no value.
Just explain that for people who don't understand.
There was also some art. There was his painting. So, and I did ask because when he said we might have to sell it because we've got to live, and that's all we've got to live on. I said, well, the provenance of the art's important that you can verify that the trust bought these pieces.
What's the provenance?
It's the history of the collectibles. So if you bought an Irma Stone or a Maggie Lopesha, where, when, how, what date, who bought it? Because, I mean, that's where auction houses do their due diligence. And they're not going to sell art, because art is an easy way to move illegal funds, launder funds. So he said, absolutely no problem. And you know, I suppose it was a...
Did he show you those problems?
Yeah. In fact, he showed the auctioneer. So the auctioneer told me that was all shown. And
How much was there in the art, roughly?
It's difficult to say, but from memory, about 25 million rand was sold. And I think it literally was just for the family to live on. They also sold the house in their farm in Stellenbosch, and they live in Amanus. So, I mean, I feel kind of awkward that I don't know much more than what I'm telling you, and it's because it's not a trading trust. We haven't actually had a formal trustees meeting. There might be a resolution that comes around and says, can we approve a disbursement to the beneficiary, the children of the beneficiaries, of $1 million to live, and so on. And, you know, you ask the questions, are there funds? Yes, okay, that's fine. And so I suppose naively, I hate using that word because I think I'm smart, naively I went along thinking, this has got nothing to do with what was now unfolding. And obviously, I'm kind of a loyal person. You know, when a person comes to me and says, look, I'm not in a good place, will you help me? It takes a lot for me to say no. And throughout my life, I've done that. I've got political friends who've fallen out of favor, and I've always stood with them. And then they're back in favor, and that's the course of life. And I've never pronounced, and I've deliberately not wanted to have inside information, because I don't want to pronounce on Markus's journey. It's just one of those things. It's not, otherwise I can't be a trustee of his family trust. So that is my gut feel. And I hadn't seen his children for a long time. When I last saw them, they were small. So I got to know them again. And then now the oldest one's married, and they, well, that's the oldest daughter, and his son Michael is a trustee as well. So I got to know him and reacquaint myself. And I think that was the principle. They saw me, and they saw Rian as the uncles that would just be there to guide the family in the eventuality that things go really, really badly for Markus in whatever form. So, and I think...
What do you mean by that, in whatever form? Did you have a fear that maybe he would commit suicide?
I had a dreadful fear that he just looked, and that's when my heart just went out to him. He just looked terrible, really. It actually makes me quite sad just thinking about it. And yeah, I must be honest, I wouldn't want his wife to hear this, but I mean, he was being beaten up over a relationship he had that he had ended 2 years earlier, and then he had to deal with it in the press. His marriage was taking a hell of a strain. His wife was to understand. And I think that it crossed my mind that this guy, you know, but he's strong. But on the other side, I just saw a vulnerability, and I saw a human side to him. And I'll be honest, I reached out to him. You know, his wife, I spoke to her. She was in tears. And I think, and I still feel desperate for him. I really do. You know, Markus was just such a brilliant businessman, and I'm just so sad that it just went this way. But
Gary,
for
respect,
everyone, for everyone.
He's a massive fraudster. It's common cause. It's not just common cause. We know that he stole, that he lied, that he covered his tracks, that he lied more, and he continued to cover his tracks, and took everybody. Far smarter people than you and I, who are sitting in very elevated seats in New York, London, Frankfurt, wherever you look. Do you think he might have played you?
I don't know. I mean, I'd like to believe I'm smart enough to not be played, but I do think, you know, Markus was a very strong individual. I mean, he had a powerful board, a very highly regarded board, and you know, he is such a personality that you will go with the message, and you will believe it. And I think that's how, and I mean, who's to say how things might have unfolded differently? Because I just think the one side of me still is sad because it's such a business skill, and the other side, I think he was just so driven and so ambitious. When things started going wrong for him, and what I've read subsequently in America at Mattress World, and then trying to sort of plug holes, I can just see the panic because he's a success. He believes he's success. He's surrounded by people who believe, he's the best things, in the business world. That the need to not let the team down, himself down and fall was so great that, that's when he was going to survive in whatever way possible. That's how I read it now. Maybe I'm generous, but I have to just say, I think in life, and they always say, no good deed goes unpunished. I've had to wake up to all the calls I've had this morning to say, you made a judgment error, would you do it again? Definitely not with the information that's come out since. Definitely yes, with the position I was in at the time.
So how long
and
after?
It was really...
You said 2 weeks after the whole Steinhoff explosion.
It had just gone mad. So there was no news. The PwC forensic report hadn't come out. And, when I saw him, I never actually... I suppose I wanted to avoid what was there. Does that make sense? It's a weird thing. You're in a social environment, you're with his family, and it's at a birthday, because that was sort of important time to just sort of Brian get together, and his family and mine. Not an environment where you say, so how do you feel about this information? How do you feel about what's coming? Markus is always supremely confident, and I think he will fight to say he did nothing wrong. That is the nature of Markus. And the law will take its course. And I just, as a humanist, just wish the best for the family, and I hope it all just, is resolved in some fashion. But I think where we are today, this is a massive, massive development yesterday, and I think the authorities are under enormous pressure to deal with these events, and Steinhoff is the biggest. There are others. So I have no doubt this is not going away. This is something, and I have to be cognizant of my own fiduciary responsibilities. I sit on public company boards. People are going to judge me and say, but surely you knew, or were you involved? Or I didn't even have a trustee's fee. To me, it was inappropriate. I was just asked to look after the family if something should happen to him. Mm. But
to say that again, you were asked to look after the family if something should happen to him.
Yes,
so
those
not
were almost
suicide. Maybe someone bumped him off because they were so angry.
It could have been, yeah. And in my mind, it was either or. And as I said, very dark days for him. But you've got to just, as I said, going back to my position, I've got to take ownership that for these 4 years, I was a trustee of the family trust, which I still say didn't trade, didn't do anything, and had no link.
Are you sure about that?
No, that I can say.
Have you been able to go through
the last set of
balance?
Accounts I got was 2 years ago, and it just had these properties, and there's a loan account which is worth naught, and I mean it's common cause that Mayfair is where he's been challenged, all the banks, and selling all his assets. So if there's a loan claim that the Silveroak Trust had against Mayfair, it's worth naught. Mm-hmm. The only assets were some art that he collected in that trust and his homes, his personal homes, and I think there were 2 investment homes in Pretoria, not big. And the quantum value of those is in the early hundreds. How much is the home in Amanus worth? And that was it. I mean, when the one asset, the assets as they got sold were really just dispersed to fund the family's living expenses and legal expenses. So then never for a minute did I think that it would get to the Reserve Bank saying, okay, now Silveroak, you're in our sights. But I think that preceded all of the years and years and years of him accumulating his wealth and getting into the trust, and then from the trust down to the Mayfair. And that's where he traded. That's where he had his horse interests and his other interests. The court, the Western Cape High Court, granted the Reserve Bank. Now, this is interesting. It's not the Hawks. It's not the police services. It's
it's not even the NPA, National Prosecuting Authority. It's the Reserve Bank that's gone after Jooste. And the number they're talking about is 4 billion rand.
It's an insane number.
So this is a guy who, according to the Reserve Bank, had been stealing money from Steinhoff shareholders and been putting it into his various assets, including this one that you're a trustee of on Silveroak, on the trust. So I guess when it all pans out, it's either a proceed of crime or it's not.
100%.
And if it is?
And if it is, that's the law must take its course. I mean, in my position, and Rian, we're both in the same. And I suppose you could say Michal as well as trustees, although he's a beneficiary, we're not. You know, we would, as in our fiduciary capacity, just absolutely support any process and any information requested by the Reserve Bank. I mean, I don't even know if we would be allowed to resign now. I mean, obviously I'd love to, but I think it would leave a trust without trustees, and you must face up to it and do what you've got to do. That's right. So, you know, if the Reserve Bank says, can you have access? Absolutely. Can you have sight of all the sales? Absolutely. Where did the funds go? There. And I don't believe on our tenure that there's going to be any funnies found. Not don't believe that there will be no funnies found. That it was just a case of, that was where the family business kind of assets stayed. I mean, many entrepreneurs do this. They in effect, an entrepreneur is a gambler, and you shouldn't gamble with your home because of your obligations to your wife and children. So you put your home in a trust, and you keep it sterilized away from your business. And I think that's very clearly what his objective was from day one, to create a family trust where the beneficiaries were just his wife and 3 children. And it was as far away and removed from his business dealings as possible. As business dealings took place in Mayfair Speculators. And that's how it was represented to me when I was given the choice to say, no, I'm not going to be a trustee. Or, yeah, under those circumstances, I'll do it. And I phoned Rian, and he had the same questions. And he knew Markus a bit better than me, and he had a bit better, I think, inside track. But I just felt that, you know, the comfort I got from him was, no, it is just there at the top. It's the house and the properties. The house in Stellenbosch, the house in Hermanus, 2 or 3 investment houses, but small. And whatever art he'd collected over the years. And there's a number floating around of 90 million I heard last night. I don't believe that's anywhere near that number, but I mean, it is what it is. And I don't know what percentage of these collections been sold, but I don't think it's a much more than about 20 million, 25 million.
That's still big numbers for most people, but I guess he's given his legal issues, he's had big expenses as well.
Yeah.
Did you talk to him in the last 4 years?
No, as I said, the funny thing is it was always in a social gathering. It is, and you never just you just feel uncomfortable to say, tell me about your story. I'm curious to know. The little bits and pieces I got was the problem started in America. And I mean, that's, you know, everyone makes a bad investment. They made a shocking investment there. And that was but they could have traded out, you know, the optimistic CEO, we could have, but we couldn't. And then everything went pop. And I think he kind of almost appreciated that I didn't drill into what had happened.
Oh, obviously.
I think it would have
obviously.
And I mean, and I wouldn't be sitting here maybe if I had. We'll have our cross to bear, and I've got to bear that one. And I'll still say, you know, we weren't close friends, but I consider him a friend. And you know, that was the journey. Look, at the end of the day,
He stuck you in the middle, and you still consider him a friend.
Well, you heard what Mustard said at your BizNews thing. Bernard said, we all felt sore, but Markus became very religious. And when Markus went to him and he said, I've done wrong, will you forgive me? Bernard said, as a Christian, I have to accept that. And it was a very interesting take on that situation. So he said, yes, we socialize. But that's it. We socialize. You know, it's not like house friends. We will see each other once a year at a birthday. And I'll go and I'll wish him well. And I understand that kind of Bernard speech I resonated with, because that's been my own journey.
Problem with this, of course, is that his wife is trying to live a normal life. She's a member of the Hermanus Golf Club. She tells all the ladies at Hermanus Golf Club that, don't worry, Markus says this is all blowing over in a year's time. Now her jewelry's been taken, her house has been taken. where does she stand in all of this?
Absolutely. Ingrid is a wonderful human being. And I think, unfortunately, she's been just too sheltered from business and the journey of Steinhoff. So it's easy to say she benefited from the lifestyle and so on and so on. But Markus is a very strong personality. And business is not for women. Business is for men who, at the cutting edge of business. And so she played a very traditional role as a housewife and as a mother to the children. Absolutely adores her. She's been incredibly loyal to him over this journey. So have his children, and they've rallied around him. But
do you think they know what he did? Do you think they appreciate how many people he hurt?
So I think yes and no. I think Michael definitely. Michael's also a chartered accountant. Michael knows that the Steinhoff implosion cost billions and billions and billions. Look at how much money Christo lost. And I think you can't avoid that. You can't avoid that discussion that if you go into a restaurant, someone's going to say, "But I lost my pension fund on you," and he could turn around and say, "But you invested in the stock market," and that's like going. It is in a way a risky investment. No, everything's got risk.
This is fraud, man. Come on.
I'm not trying to defend. No, don't worry. I'm not trying to defend. I'm trying to say that if I lost money, I would say to myself, and I have, I lost money in Goma Goma. I made the decision. He didn't defraud me, though. We went under. It was wrong. The chain screwed the shit out of us, and that was it. Company went under. And you dust yourself off, but you go into your next business. And I was never going to touch furniture again after that disastrous foray. And I learned a lot from it. And I mean, in corporate South Africa, you form these partnerships. And some are really good, and some are terrible. And some friendships are really good and sustained, and some are terrible. And that's the nature of our journey.
Why do you think he remained friendly with you if your business relationship had terminated 30 years ago?
Markus, it's not like we were friends. We saw each other.
But he remained friendly.
In the early days, after Goma Goma, I think he got on with building Steinhoff, and I was a bit sore. So I probably didn't reach out to him, in fairness. And so we didn't see, I might have seen him at a horse racing meeting because I also, for my sons, had horses at one stage. But it just kind of then became like once a year at the annual presentation of Steinhoff, I'd get an invite, and I thought, let me just go and say hello. I haven't seen him for a year or two. How is he? How's the family? As I said, when I went back to the house in Amanus, I hadn't seen the children other than Michael at a post race.
What I'm trying to get at now, do you think it was because of your standing in the business community that he asked you to be a trustee? Because here's a guy who had a lot of people around him, a very tight-knit team, accountants, lawyers. It wasn't like he didn't have people he could choose from. Bernard Cantor from Investec, very close to Markus. Bram van Haastien, the partner of Bernard Mostert. There were others.
I think we've got to give him credit for one thing. He said to me, I've asked you and Rion because you guys are totally uncontaminated with my journey at Steinhoff, and it's true. I also chose you because I think who would my family trust and who would be there for them? And I still feel strongly about that obligation, and you just have to.
So what are you going to do now?
So, I mean, the easy way is to run away and to resign. But I spoke to Rion this morning, and he said, look, that's the easy exit, but you've got a responsibility to see through your fiduciary responsibilities as a trustee. And we will.
And what are they?
Whatever the Reserve Bank wants from us, we have to give, and will promptly. And within, so I've asked a lawyer in Cape Town just to reach out to their lawyers and just say whatever I can do to help, please just let me know. I mean, I'm a respondent in terms of my fiduciary role as a trustee. The respondent really is the Silveroak Trust, amongst others, because there's cars they're trying to find owners of and so on. So, there's 3 trustees of Silveroak, so I'm one of them. So you want to attach Silveroak Trust work to the trustees. And I think that's the right thing, And if there are any assets there, let the transparency be there, and let the law take its course. And my perspective is I accepted this request. It's come at a cost because people will question my business wisdom and judgment.
And you weren't paid?
Not a cent. Not a cent.
So
And I'm not
you-
involved. You know, the first thing people say, but you have to be involved in this. Absolutely not. And I can hold my hand up on that. And everyone in that Steinhoff family will confirm Gary was nowhere.
And you still don't feel like you've been played.
Alex, I'd love to say it, but I can't. In my heart, I can't say I was played. I think Markus realized that I did have a stature that was, and I believe I've worked my entire business life to retire with an unblemished track record. I've never been sued or sued anyone in my entire career. I've sat on 17 public company boards. And I think he realized or thought Gary would be the kind of guy to distance myself, because he's not a trustee, that when the shit hits the fan here, this is fine with my family. And so if that's being played, I see it differently. I see it, he made a decision and I I accepted that responsibility. And that responsibility has now still got to take its course to the law, to the authorities, to the creditors, and to the family.
But with everything that emerged in the last 4 years while you were a trustee, did you ever consider leaving the trust then? Or is it still your intention that this trust is clean and it is there for the family?
Yeah.
Even though it might be through proceeds of crime.
Yeah, no. I mean, that is going to be the speculation that the trust get created 20, 30, 40 years ago through however money was earned. I'm still going to say, no, in the last 4 years, absolutely not. I just felt it was just there. I didn't, I've never, when people say, do you know Markus? I said, yes, I do. How? Well, and I'm honest about that. I played that role. And I'm not going to run away from that. But I honestly did feel, and still do, that the trust in these 4 years has done nothing wrong. It hasn't traded, it hasn't broken any forex law, hasn't brought in money, sent out money, done anything wrong that affects the Reserve Bank. And if it has, on my watch and Rian's, we're both damn stupid CAs. But we haven't had the accounts for the last 2 years. But I do know from asking him on the management accounts, the only asset there is a loan to Mayfair, which is worth naught.
And the houses.
And the houses, of which one is sold. And that's it. So, yeah, you're trustee of 100 million rands worth of properties, bottom line.
Gary?
And your role as a trustee was defined to look after his family, who are not and weren't involved in his business world.
Well, the Reserve Bank seems to think, because they've taken Ingrid's jewelry.
Yeah, which is just terribly sad. But I mean, that is the reality, because the same theme is going to pervade, isn't it? Where did the money come from, and was it legally earned? Because the man earned a very big salary and earned bonuses. Was it legally earned or not? And, he was a businessman. He had lots of businesses. Mayfair had investments in, was it a sweet factory? Or I seem to remember at one stage, and had the investment in the stables. It had massive investments and also big debt. But it soon became apparent, and that was a question I did put to Rian some time ago, that the debt basically was the asset sales were going to meet the debts. So the bank's probably going to get all their money back at Mayfair, but there would be nothing left anywhere else.
That's all, I guess, going to be coming out in the wash. What are you going to do now? With everything that's going on now, you can be sure that there are people who are saying, oh, well, Harlow, he and Rian du Plessis was Phumelela, Markus controlled horse racing, Phumelela, he's in a different case. But this guy must also be one of Markus's lieutenants and buddies and storing away money for him. Clearly, you've explained to us that wasn't the case.
Look, I mean, this morning, I'll be absolutely upfront with you. My wife phoned me. We were both in tears. I mean, it's affects my reputation, everything I've worked for. And that's just the way it is.
Yeah, it's massive, Gary.
I'm going to...
And you still feel he's okay?
I've been beaten up enough in a day. No, I'm going to do I think in my role, I'm a director of still 2 public companies, and they're large. And out of just respect to those boards and to their shareholders and everything else, if there's any concern someone might have about my integrity, the right thing to do is to deal with it myself. And as much as, after 45 years in corporate South Africa, to resign from, 2 large and well-respected boards, it hurts. But it's a decision I'm going to reflect on and probably take today. So that's part of the terrible journey I've woken up to. But I think, again, it's right. And I've got, the good news for me is, I know in my heart of hearts, I've got no involvement in any enrichment or any participation in anything, right or wrong, over many, many, many years. I mean, I only found out after the Steinhoff collapse that in my discretionary fund run by Investec, they had a few Steinhoff shares. So there was probably R1 million lost there, but it wasn't a significant loss to me. And I found it afterwards. So we've got our journeys, and you know what, in life, and I keep going back to this, just no good deed does go unpunished. It just seems that is part of our journey in this world. I mean, I gave you an analogy of, if you're a doctor in America and there's a bad car accident and you stop, do you help that person and maybe save a life, or do you say the chances of being sued if they die are very high? You make the call, you stop, and you save a life. And I think that's what you have to be judged on, your integrity in everything, in the way you deal with people who come to you for help. And would I do it again if someone came to you for help and looked as desperate as Markus did? Yes. Have I done anything? I've got nothing to hide. In fact, I often make myself unpopular on boards because I'm very robust. I sit on many public company audit committees, I've chaired many, and that's my discipline. That's what I'm known for. I will make enemies because I will chase down to the last cent. Why, how, where's the governance, who approved? And I know that my colleagues on those boards will confirm and vouch for that. So I have no concerns about how I'm perceived with my contemporaries and equals in my world on boards.
Just to close off with, so you didn't know that the Western Cape High Court had been approached, even though you were listed as a respondent?
Nothing. I got WhatsApp
but that's
yesterday.
Unfair, surely, if you're a respondent.
I haven't spoken to Markus. I put a call to his son last night, and I said, what's going on? And he said, oh no, there's been a big thing. I said, well, just please keep me in the loop. And then I phoned Rian, and Rian's on a farm, and he couldn't speak and lost the signals. I phoned him again this morning. So I'm trying to put pieces together at what's going on. What are they attaching? Because, friends have phoned me saying, there's R1 billion of assets hidden. I said, there's no R1 billion of assets in this. Otherwise, I'm a fool, and I don't know how to read a balance sheet. There's an impaired asset. But that's historic. I mean, I focused on what was there when we took over, and how can that be liquidated?
What does it mean, an impaired asset?
Written down. So if you've got a loan account, a loan claim against the company, and that company's insolvent, you must impair your loan to naught.
So
you're not going to get anything.
If I understand correctly, then this Silveroak Trust would have lent money to Mayfair,
yes,
and then Mayfair did all the trading and what.
And how it got that money is way precedes
before your time.
And I never even asked, to be honest. Family trust, what's it got? These houses, what are your needs? So much to live on, legal fees, and I support my children, and X a month. Okay, now you're going to have to sell some assets. You've only got 3 houses and a bit of art to sell. And that really was all we had to do. So it wasn't, to me, a big burden in my life. If I signed a resolution once or twice a year, it was it.
Who were the trustees before you?
Don't actually know.
Okay. Because clearly they're the guys who should be answering these questions.
I think it was his son-in-law. I think he was a trustee.
All right.
Also a chartered accountant.
Any reason why
he's
resigned?
married to his second daughter. God, I can't think of his name. I think it was his son-in-law. And I don't know. Maybe it's just too much family. I think he really wanted to face the music here in his business dealings, and he wanted to protect his family here. Gary, Rian, can you just protect my family from this? Can you just look after them? Just sell those assets. If someone bumps me off, or I just need to know that you will just help them, advise them. My son is an aspirant businessman. He'll need a mentor. Will you just hold his hand and give him some advice? Honesty, in as many words, that is the mandate given to myself and Rian.
Gary Harlow, thanks for being so honest. Gary Harlow, a businessman and trustee of the Silveroak Trust. I'm Alec Hogg from BizNews.com.